There are times when we absolutely need the Lord's direction. So we seek Him. We need His plan, His direction, especially in troubling and challenging times. We're dependent on Him and we're looking for Him to give us direction. But does it ever seem like what He does call us to do is the one thing that seems to be the most challenging, seems to be the hardest, the scariest? When there's an alternative sometimes also that seems like, God, if you would just point in that direction, that would seem like your favor and your blessing. But when God does point to the thing that seems to be the hardest, the scariest, when we're called to trust Him when it makes no sense, will we really be willing to obey? We live in an era when we will increasingly need to depend on God. We will need His direction, His provision, His care. We will absolutely need to develop a greater degree of trust. Now, the challenge, though, is when God points us in a direction, but there's an alternative. See, when we go to Him and there's an option over here that seems like, frankly, it would be easier. It would be blessed. God, this seems like the one we would think you would choose because you love us and you want to make it easier and we would be blessed over here. But often God is saying, no. This is where I'm going to protect you. I'm going to take care of you. I'm going to bless you. And the challenge becomes we live in a society that continually trains us to go for the thing that makes sense rather than that absolute walking on water faith in Him. So I want to look at a story in Jeremiah 42 that I hope would challenge you and I, that we would reinforce our commitment that, Lord, okay, even when it doesn't make sense, whatever you call us to do, we'll do. So Jeremiah 42. Now, the context is things are bad. They don't just look bad, they're bad. Now, God has empowered Nebuchadnezzar to conquer everything in sight. So that really throws in the challenge, like, God, you're allowing this to happen. In the bad, Nebuchadnezzar is attacking. War, people they know have died. People who didn't die were taken captive and taken away. And this group of people, now they do the right thing. They start out strong. They come to Jeremiah, and effectively what they say is this: would you seek the Lord on our behalf? We need Him to tell us what to do. And Jeremiah responds by saying, okay, I will do that. And all I will do, I will tell you exactly whatever it is He tells me. Now the people say this: whatever He says, whether it's good or it's bad. In other words, whether we like it or not, whatever He says to do, we will do it, whether we like it or not. In fact, they go on and they actually say, because we know if we obey Him, He will protect us. He'll take care of us. He will bless us. So they acknowledge that whether it sounds good or not, they'll do it. And that in obeying Him, He will protect, He'll bless, He'll watch over them. Sounds great, right? So Jeremiah goes away. And Jeremiah goes and seeks the Lord. Now, what's interesting also is we want the quick answer. I do anyway. I don't know about you. I want the answer like now, like the microwave. It takes too long. But Jeremiah comes back 10 days later with the Lord's response. Now, before we jump into that, I want to explain where the temptation is here. See, again, Nebuchadnezzar is destroying everything. Now, Egypt seems like the most reasonable alternative. So at some degree, are they really hoping God will say, yeah, go to Egypt and I'll protect you there? Why? Egypt is wealthy. They won't suffer. There's food, there's no famine, there's no war. It seems like the right alternative. So 10 days later, Jeremiah comes back. And here's where it's interesting. He starts out by saying, the Lord says, if you are willing. So often, because He calls us to a walk of faith, what God is saying, here's my plan, here's my direction. If you are willing to align with it, if you are willing to align your life to what I'm calling you to do. And he says to them, if you are willing to stay here in the land, if you're willing to stay in the land that I promised so many years ago, in spite of Nebuchadnezzar rampaging, the man, now this is not part of it, but Nebuchadnezzar is the one that the Lord empowered him to do all that he's doing. But the alternative is, that means, as we will see, the Lord can cause him to be merciful, which he does say. So the Lord says through Jeremiah, if you are willing and you'll stay in the land, I'll protect you. And I will watch over you. I will cause him, Nebuchadnezzar, to show you mercy. Basically, if you are willing to do the thing that is scary, the thing that takes an absolute leap of faith, and trust me, then I'll watch over you. I will make sure that you receive mercy. Basically, if you'll do this, I will bless you. I'm going to take care of everything. But he goes on, and he says, but if you choose to go to Egypt because it seems like a better alternative, if you choose to go to Egypt because you don't want to face any war, if you want to go to Egypt because you don't want to face famine, potentially being hungry, if you want to go to Egypt because you think you will not do without, if you want to go to Egypt because you think you won't suffer there, then what will happen? And so God says to them, if you choose to go to Egypt, all the things you left to avoid will happen to you there. So even though Egypt looks to be wealthy and it looks to be the safe place, it looks to be the place where you would be blessed, God actually says, if you were willing to trust me right here, when it's scary, when it doesn't seem reasonable, when it seems like there is no hope, I will make sure you are shown mercy. I will make sure you're blessed. You'll stay in the place I gave you. But if you choose the alternative that seems safer, it's less scary, it doesn't require us to trust Him. It seems like the option. In fact, so often we can justify in our heads that, God, isn't this the one? Wouldn't this be your blessing to tell us to go here? But see, God was calling them to trust Him at a whole different level, in spite of probably things we couldn't imagine how bad it was. And God said, if you will ignore the circumstances, trust me, and if you're willing to stay and trust me, I'll take care of everything. You'll receive mercy. You will be blessed. You'll be protected. You'll be safe here in the scary place. But if you choose to go to the thing that seems more reasonable, seems like in our minds the better alternative, then everything that you hoped would happen won't happen. And all the things that you hope to avoid will happen to you there. Now, unfortunately, as you can assume, the people, rather than choosing to trust God, what happens? We start out strong. You know, they actually said whether we'll do whatever He says, whether we like it or not. I really believe when they said that, they genuinely meant it. But see what happens over time, and the news is scary, and we start out strong. But what happens? We allow doubt to creep in. Was that really God? Was Jeremiah wrong? Can God really protect us here? Are we sure that's not better? And what happens is that erodes our confidence, erodes our trust. And what happened? They wound up going to Egypt and missing out on God's blessing. Now, the reason I've wanted to share this particular episode is we are called to be a people of faith. And when we trust Him, then in spite of how scary it is, in spite of how hard it may seem, then He is glorified. And that's what is the number one priority. Now, a byproduct is He watches over and He protects, He blesses. They even acknowledge that if we will obey Him, He'll bless us. But in the end, fear was more powerful than their faith. And so for you and I, as the world around us is constantly changing, when we are literally moving into an era when we need an absolute deeper trust in Him, that we will need to rely on Him even more, we have to learn to reject what seems to be the safe option and absolutely trust that even with what He calls us to, even if it's scary, that He's got it under control, He'll be glorified, and we're blessed.